Hi, Audrey. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. It's so nice to see your face on camera for the first time. I
For
feel
the
like
first time,
the
yes.
first time. I feel like we haven't been connected for too long, and we connected last week and talked about recording
Hmm.
your testimony, and I'm so happy that it has happened so quickly. Um,
Yes, me too. Thank you.
And when we started speaking, it seemed to me that you had quite a clear idea of something specific, specific message that you wanted to come through that you learned through your testimony, and maybe even a specific population or type of person that you would like to reach. So I thought that could be a cool way to kind of open up to talk about who you feel. I mean, in recording these testimonies with people, every testimony reaches everyone, but you seem to have zoned in on a population that you would like to.
Yes, yes. I would like to reach those Christians or even non-Christians who are stuck in the spirit of lust, um, and and adultery, because I have a background of being in adultery. So I would I would like to reach anyone that, you know, I guess is dealing with those things. That was my past, and Yah has definitely changed that. So I want to definitely share, um, from my upbringing and what happened and where I am now.
That sounds awesome. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hear your story. I'm all ears. If you need me to pipe in at some point, I will, but I have a feeling that you're
Yeah. Okay. So I'm the oldest of three daughters. Um, my parents, my dad was in the Navy in Vietnam. And my mom was his second wife, so he had already been married once. Um, and my mom was just a farm girl of 12 children. There was 12 children, and I think they lived originally in New York, upstate New York. Um, and my parents met. Um, my dad had an accident um, while I was being born, or while he was in the hospital. I was born. He had a motorcycle accident, and he lost his arm. It was a pretty tragic accident. In the hospital, he had gotten gangrene, so they had to cut his arm a little further up. Um, so my dad, well, when I was born, would start to be on, pain meds for the pain because he had phantom pain.
Mm.
Um, the pain meds wouldn't cut it, so that he'd have really good days and then bad days. And so then he started to go to drinking to try to, get the pain under control. Um, so um, that's what my dad had struggled with um, all of his life. Um, and let me see here. So, we grew up as Christians. Um, we moved around a lot, so we went to many churches. Um, we we did all of the holidays. I remember VBS was my favorite time. Being in church was when we had Vacation Bible School because there was all these activities and I was gonna say sorry. I just want to make sure I'm catching everything here. Um, but so we grew up. My mom was mostly the Christian in the family. Dad believed. Um, we would go to church. We moved around a lot, so we went to many churches. I remember going to church in Florida. I'd be baptized in Florida. I was baptized in Vermont. Um, I was baptized out in Arizona. Um,
So
we
did you get
would
did
move
you
out
get baptized at every church that you went to? You arrived and then you were claimed by
pretty
that church through
much.
baptism.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. And we ended up moving out to Arizona. My dad wanted to be out west, and we moved out to Arizona. And I want to say I was around like 7 years old at that time. And my dad decided he was going to take a trip out to see his brother in New York. And when he did, he called my mom up and told her over the phone that he was going to leave her. And I remember being in the kitchen when she got the phone call. And his brother had introduced him into a new woman. So that's why he was leaving my mom. So we packed up from leaving Arizona. We came back east to where my mom's family, is. And my mom pretty much raised us. Dad was in the picture. He would come visit. Um, he would live near us for the most part, in New York State. We would go travel to see him. There was one time, like I said, we moved down to Florida, and he came down with us, whatnot. But the girlfriend was always in the picture, and I was a daddy's girl. Um, I remember one time he was sitting in bed, and I jumped in bed to get next to him to spend some time with him, and I accidentally hit his arm, and it caused him pain, and I just was so upset that I caused him pain. And so he just meant everything to me. And so I just remember a lot of trauma during my childhood, crying myself to sleep. Why did daddy leave? Why did daddy leave? Um, and then it turned into, resentment to the girlfriend because she took my daddy, you know. And so my mom, she was a Christian woman. She, they were separated for a very long time. I want to say like a good 10 years while he, had a relationship. So she held out for, him to come back, and I think he kind of led her on a lot that he would. Um and so, there was some my mom would even let my father stay at the house with the girlfriend with us kids. It was a bit confusing and whatnot. Um, but so, um, with us moving back, being around my mom's family, I would then also be sexually abused by some of my relatives as a child. Um, and, it was something that I would bring up to my relatives, and they're like, no way, that didn't happen. So I dealt with that, being, sexually active at a younger age because of being molested, you know. Um, so, you know, my mom, she would teach us, about tribulation. She would tell us some pretty scary stories about, the tribulation. You guys have to be prepared, be careful about the mark of the beast and all the scary stuff that, in Revelations that would go on. So I always held on to that. She'd also go over the Ten Commandments. Um, she was the one that was always, teaching us. Um, and even though, church was boring to me as a kid, I would go and it just, I remember falling asleep in church, and just, it was boring. I didn't really want to go. Um, but so let me just look at my notes here. Mom raised us, and, the separation really took a toll on my mom. And in high school, we got a call that my mom had had a breakdown. She had gone out into the parking lot of our apartment complex and was screaming and yelling that Jesus was returning. Um, and she had, got quite hysterical and worked up about it. Um, and so the police were called. They then gave her a diagnosis, put her on medications. So my mother would be then labeled with schizophrenia and bipolar because of, her outbreak. Um, I would, it was hard. I basically lost my mom at that point, to the mental illness. She would still go to church. There was a few times where she went to some churches that were kind of cultish. And There was one church where like they had to wear like the 1800s style, dresses. Um, and at like they wouldn't even let the girls go into the to swim, without these long dresses on. So I just thought it was very odd, going from one extreme to the next. And so I kind of fell away, definitely in high school. I was not going to church. Um, and I ended up actually meeting my husband in high school in freshman year. I He was coming up the courtyard, and I said to my friend, I was like, "Do you see that guy coming up the courtyard?" I pointed him out, and I was like, "Do you have class with him?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do at the end of the day." And I was like, "Could you ask him out for me?" So I know I sound like I'm skipping all over the place, but um,
I'm following you, totally following you.
I'm good. Okay.
Yes.
I feel like I'm skipping because I wrote a lot down, but I'm like, I don't need to go into that much detail. But so I ended up meeting my husband in high school in freshman year. And so she asked him out, "You want to a school dance?" And it was it. We dated all through high school. Um, College, he went to school for carpentry out in New York State. I went to Massachusetts for animal care. So we were a good 4 hours away. So we both, graduated after 2 years. And then about a year later, we got married. Um, our first child came, a year later, a little less than a year later. So we have two boys. And we just got into work mode. And he was working as a carpenter. I was working as a manager at Blockbuster because I was also a very big movie buff. So I love movies, and wow, this was the best job because I could watch movies and recommend movies. And so I worked for Blockbuster for quite some time, like 12 and a half years. And I ended up, well, while I was out there was some influence with some of the girls that I worked with. They, of course, I'd watch vampire movies, and some movies that were not very appropriate. Um, I kind of liked all kinds of genres. But looking back, I realized that I started reading books. And of course, the big Twilight series came out, the movies were coming out. I was like, oh, I'd love to read the books. So I got started to read the books. And I got hooked on the romance, and I got hooked on the, I don't know what you want to call it, with the vampires, the lore and whatnot. So then I read those books, and then I started going into some other, kind of raunchy, they're raunchy, what do you call them? Romance novels. So and then again, started watching TV series that were not appropriate. Um, so I didn't realize that I was opening doors to these things. Um, and I called myself a Christian. We kept Christmas. Halloween was a big, holiday for us. We the kids did Halloween. We dressed them up. We ended up having a home at one point where it was basically the whole street shuts down, and you got like 700 kids that come through, and so we had the kids doing those things. The biblical part I had left in my life was just that, I made sure that the kids had a middle name. It was biblical. You know, um, we got married in a church. Um, I called myself
You
a
sound like
Christian,
just
but
a very normal American family who does normal
yep,
things, including watching whatever you want on TV and reading whatever you want. You're just very normal. You're very much of the world, right? There's not really a
yep,
difference between you and your atheist neighbor. You're doing all the same things.
doing the same stuff. Yep, yep. And so, you know, um, down the road, alcoholism would become an issue with my husband. Um, and we struggled with that, that stronghold that, uh, and, raising kids. And it got to a point where, things got like, I would go to him and tell him like, hey, you know, um, things need to change. There was one point where, I kind of gave him an ultimatum. It's like your family or the alcohol. He quit for a time being. Um, Things had gotten better. Um, then we had opened the door. Not only was I doing romance novels, bad movies, then opened the door to porn. So um, we were both watching that, and um, it got to a point where you know, we lost we lost the house because I had lost my job. Um, and then we were in another house situation where the people that bought it were going to sell it to us, and we didn't have my husband didn't have a job on the books, so we weren't able to buy it. The 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 couple were going through a divorce, so they had to sell the house, so we had to move again. And at that point, I was just like, you know what? I'm I'm kind of like at my wit's end, and my youngest was um, a freshman, or sorry, not a freshman. He was a senior in high school, and I I left my husband. Um, he went to stay with his parents, and I had found an apartment, and him and I had moved out. And this was November of 2019, that I would have moved out. I had 5 jobs. I was baking. I was a DJ. I had picked up doing DJing because the kids were doing wrestling. And I thought, they were paying these DJs to come in to try to, earn money for the wrestling team. Why don't I just do it? You don't have to pay me for it. And it's just all the proceeds are going to the wrestling team. So I started that, and then it morphed into doing weddings, graduation parties. Of course, I love music too, right? I loved all kinds of music, like rap and hardcore, music and whatnot. Um, Let me back up a little bit before I had left my husband, because this is another key part. With all of those influences in my life, like I said, I had opened up doors. I also started working out, and I started losing weight. I started to lift weights, so I started to like bodybuild, and then the there was what do you call it? Tough Mudder. I started training for Tough Mudders. And so there was a team of us that were doing Tough Mudder. So I started getting attention. So I opened the door up. Now I'm starting getting attention from other men. And it kind of put a wedge in, and that was also another determining factor where I left my husband. So I ended up committing adultery. Um, we were separated, and um, he ended up, and because we were separated, he ended up getting into a relationship with somebody. Um, and the whole time he wanted to reconcile, but I was like hard hearted. I was like, no, I don't want to reconcile right now. And I kept pushing him off. Well, 2020, the virus hits, and my eyes were just opened at that point, because at first, so I had 5 jobs, like I said. I was DJing, doing the cake business. I was making my own cakes. I worked at a couple, like a wedding venue. I worked at a restaurant bar, was waitressing. So I had like all 5 jobs, and then this virus hits. I lose everything. And so I lost all my jobs. And then, we were locked down. I had a senior. He obviously couldn't go to school. And for like a week, the fear was there just for a second. But then, like I said, my eyes were opened. And from what my mother had taught me as a kid, it like came to my memory. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're in the end days. Like I would go into the stores and see all the PPE, and I was like, this is, whoa, like all of a sudden so fast. We've got plexiglass up, and they're selling all these like signs for 6 foot apart, and it opened my eyes. Um, I do have to go back to a dream that I had back in 20, it was 2000 when the kids were young. It was 2000, 2002. I had this dream, and it was a wilderness dream with Jesus. Okay. And in this dream, uh, I didn't realize it at first too. We were above the wilderness. The wilderness was beautiful. It was so lush, so green. There was no civilization. And he's giving me instructions. I can't tell you what they were, okay? But he was giving me instructions, and I told him, yes, I will go do this. So I set out to go into the wilderness and do what he told me, instructed me to do. So from that dream, though, I've always had a knowing. This is how I can explain it. It's a knowing. And this knowing was that during tribulation, I was going to be helping people, whether it was like a group of people, helping feed them, helping, protect them. It's just some knowing that I had. So, okay, so that dream. And then when this virus hits, my eyes are opened, and I'm like, now I'm praying, and I'm like, Lord, please show me what's going on. Um, I started seeing things, about the virus, learning about what was going on, what was true, what was not. I started seeing things about Christmas being pagan. And I was like, well, that's weird, because some of the rabbit holes I was starting to go into um, were leading me in so much. So it got to a point where I was like, I don't want to go through tribulation without my husband. I'm like, he is my rock. Like, we've been together since high school. And I'm like, so I went into my bedroom, and I was all alone in the apartment, and I cried out to God. And I tell you what, I feel like his presence was there. It was like a light was coming through, maybe a window, right? But his presence was there. I cried out and I said, you don't like divorce, because I had divorce papers all wrote up. And like, I know you don't want divorce. This is Satan's way of destroying families. Um, I know it's wrong. And I repented. I totally turned from my wicked ways that I was doing. Um, and when I did that, I started seeking God. Like, I was like, um, I had actually, I started reading the Bible. Of course, I went right to Revelations, because if we're in the end days, I got to know what's going on, So I started reading Revelations, and one day I was just like, Lord, you know, where do you want me to read? What do you want me to read? And I heard, and I heard it 2 times, Leviticus, Leviticus. I was like, okay. Now, like in Sunday school, I had all the books memorized. At this point, I don't remember, what books where, and I totally lost all that I memorized as a kid. But anyway, so I sit there, and I'm we're locked down. We don't have, work. So I'm plowing through the Bible, and I go through Leviticus, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know what you're trying to show me. I didn't pick up anything you're telling me. I'm sorry, And it wouldn't be until years later that I realized what he was doing. Yeah. So, I repented. I asked my husband if he would take me back. We got back together, and we he moved in back in with me. And our youngest ended up going to college, so we sent him off to college. Um, and we actually we inherited the home that we're in now. His family, um, this house. became available, and he inherited it through his father. So God started blessing us before I was fully coming to obedience. Um, so I'm like, okay, like I want my family to know God too. Like I knew God, I grew up, I knew him, right? Um, so I said to my husband, I said, let's start going to church. Okay, because I haven't gone to church. My mother would always say to me, come to church, come to church. You know, she would take the kids once in a while, randomly. I was like, sure, go ahead, take the kids. But her and my sister were like, why don't you come to church with us Sunday? I was like, nah, nah, I'll seek God when I want to seek him, like stop bugging me, stop bugging me. Excuse me. So he's like, yeah, let's go to church. So I was like, all right. So my son, the youngest, so we started going to church, and he was going to graduate, I think, that spring. So we started going to church, and I was like, you need to come to church with us when you get out. And he's like, all right, sure. So um, we decided to go to the church. It was a Baptist church here in town because I went to it was my cousin's funeral, and they did a really good job at the funeral. And I was like, I'm hungry for God. Like I want to know, I want to know his words. So like I was like, ooh, we're gonna go here. I had another experience with like going to another funeral actually there. So I was like, all right, I think this is the place. My sister was going there too, so that was the kind of lure to go that to that church. So me and my husband started going, and he was singing in church. He was enjoying it. We weren't there for like maybe a month, and they were going to do a newcomers class in the morning. We had a workbook, and we started doing that, and I was just like, oh, this is so good. Like I'm so hungry, I can't wait. I wanted to stay in this class. I don't want to go back out there with the pastor teaching, because this is so good. I'm like learning, I'm picking up stuff. And so it was getting around to be uh Halloween, and this guy that was doing the class, he wasn't the pastor, but he was this like side guy helping out and whatnot. He seemed to be knowledgeable. He's like, the pastor's cool. He goes, if there's any time you think he's not preaching something, he's very, open. You can go to him and talk to him. I was like, okay. He goes, but I totally trust him. I was like, okay. So we were doing class, and he's like, we told the kids about Halloween that, if they're gonna go, just not to do any really scary Halloween costumes. And I was like, wait a minute. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you tell them what Halloween is? All of the wickedness that it is. Why wouldn't you tell them in the Bible where it says that we're not to have one foot in with the wicked and one foot, we can't have two gods? And why wouldn't you give them that? So I was like, oh, that's a little lukewarm. So I was a little put off by that. And so my son started coming to church. We were going every Sunday. I was like, I am going to show God, like I am loyal to him. I'm not going to miss one Sunday at all. We kept every Sunday, and we'd go for the early class and sit through the whole thing. We couldn't always go back in the evenings because I have chickens, and it was kind of busy. But we made sure we went every Sunday. So um, they started preaching about pre-trib rapture, and I'm like, oh. So I still look over to my husband, I'm like, we don't get raptured pre-trib, no. And my son's there, and I'm like, no, we don't do that. And he
So
kept saying, well,
was that something, Audrey, that you learned from your mom? She was telling you all of the prophecies that were actually in the Bible, and she also realized that?
yeah, like she told us about the pre that we would go through tribulation, like, and she would tell us the Ten Commandments too. And so she somehow, I think my mom's really wasn't a breakdown. I think she, you know, um, like witnessed God, like maybe the Holy Spirit had really come into her, and she just didn't know what to do. But yeah, with her prepping she knew, like I didn't have any doubt. And when I read the Bible, I applied it all to me. I never thought that, because when I went to church as a kid, we memorized verses, we were just like picking at the Bible.
But it is
Really is
such
all
a
I ever
new,
did.
it's such a new thing, right? All the talk of dispensationalism and the church replacing Israel and pre-tribulation rapture, it's all very, very new. So it hadn't probably trickled into the churches that your mom was going to.
Probably not. That's true too, because I found a couple friends too, since 2020 that also they're not where I am right now, but they also knew that they were going to be going through tribulation. That they didn't think that they were going to be raptured out. Because when I questioned them at church, I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Oh, don't even bother looking at, Revelations. You don't have to worry about Revelation. We're not even going to be here." And oh, I got so sick to my stomach. So as the Holy Spirit was in me. Okay. So, and every time that there was something false, I would feel, I would feel sick that the pastor would teach. And it was, well, that's for the Jew, that's for the Jew. But I read there's neither Jew nor Gentile. There's no male or female. We're all one under Christ. Why is he separating it? Um, because like I said, I was being shown the Sabbath because I had asked the church, excuse me, I had asked the church at one point, I think when I went there, they were like, "Oh, you should come." This was before I came. I'm like, because God was showing me a Sabbath. I'm like, "But why don't you guys keep the Sabbath?" "Oh, we don't have to keep the Sabbath. That's for the Jew. We keep Sunday." So I kind of just was like, I'm not coming here, but I ended up going there. It's really weird. But so I just, when I read the scripture, I always applied everything to me. And and when I see that, it was contradicting what the pastor was saying. So that, and I kept saying to my family, well, no, it's not really like that. No, and I'm like, I can't keep telling my family what's true. And he's telling them what's not true. And I really got convicted. It was November. And I really got convicted not to keep Christmas. And, um, I had the pastor, the guy that was doing the class, they came over and I don't know, we were doing a chat and whatever. And I just came out and I was like, I'm really being convicted by God not to keep the Christmas. And I was like, his birthday is not in the Bible. Yeah, we know. And but if you're really being convicted, then don't keep Christmas. And he goes, you could talk to the pastor if you want to. And I was also convicted too to stop eating pork, stop eating unclean things. Um, so God was showing me his Sabbath. Stop eating unclean. Stop doing these pagan holidays. Like Halloween, I stopped years back. I had stopped doing Halloween. Easter, uh, I really didn't like Easter ham. And, Easter was just, let's get together and do family dinners. It was basically Easter. Um, but I was learning, you know, what the Bible said. So um it got to a point was I was like, okay, like I can't keep bringing my family here if he's going to be teaching things that are not right. And one day my sister had posted a video and it was Melissa. And I stopped and watched her video and I can't recall what she said in the video, but it was aligning with what I was being shown. So then I started watching some of her videos and I was like, okay, like I'm going to go speak to my pastor. Um, so I'm getting my Bible all marked out. It's getting highlighted, it's getting tabbed. And I'm like, all right. And my sister had posted something, and one of the churchgoers, he commented on it and he was like, we can't even keep the law. Because that was one of the things the pastor had said too. I was just so sick. He's like, we can't keep the first commandment. Like we're not even able to keep the first commandment. Like there's just no way. So he was teaching his people, we can't keep the commandments. We're wretched. We're sinners. Don't even try. So this this person had come against my sister, and I, of course, shared some information. I was like, actually, then I shared information. So I'm getting ready to go speak to the pastor, and I hear again a voice 2 times, and the voice says, "They're dividing my word." And I heard it again, so I repeated it myself. I'm like, "They're dividing my word." Okay, well, I don't know what that is. So of course I went to Google, okay, because I'm not fancy with knowing where everything is in the Bible. And they're dividing my word, New King James Version. Well, the verse 2 Timothy 2:15 pops up. Study to show thyself rightly approved unto God, a worker. Now I'm going to mess it up because I'm going from King James to New King James, but rightly dividing the word of God. And I was just like, oh gosh, God is really speaking to me. I'm hearing his voice. I'm being convicted. And so I go and I meet with a pastor. And he had spoken to the guy that had the comments in Facebook. So he had already had a heads up where I was heading. And he just went on all about himself. Um, he was really avoiding me trying to get into any subject. Then he asked me about myself. We've been going there a good 8 months. And so I was like, I said, I'm really being convicted about Christmas, not keeping Christmas. And I put my hand on the Bible and I was like, look, Jesus' birthday is not in the Bible. He goes, yeah, we know. I was like, okay, so why are you keeping Christmas? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's not in the Bible. So why are we doing it? So his wife was there too. And she says, well, we give it to God. I just make everything about God. And I was like, no, this isn't right. This just really isn't right. So I put my hand on the Bible. Of course, like I said, I had all these colored tabs all over it. And he's like, I don't have time to go over all that with you. And he goes, but I printed off some of this stuff. And some of the stuff he printed off was a map of, the church getting raptured out, whatever. And he had said to me in that sitting there, he said, I don't like to read the Bible. I don't like to read, is what he said. I don't like to read. So he was grabbing his information from other people. And this is what he had given me was a printout from someone else of this pre-rapture and what the church looks like and everything else. I folded it up and took it because I was like, I want to know what they think, you know? And so he was like, well, I hope I see you on a Sunday. And I was like, I'm going to pray on that. And I'll pray on that. Of course, I had no plans. I wanted to run and get out of the church. And I came back and I told the family, it's like, look, we're not going back to church because they're teaching lies. And I'm being shown, that there are biblical feasts to be kept. Um, Everything's pagan that we're doing. So we stopped doing Christmas. We got rid of all the pork in the house. Of course, we used to eat, shellfish and stuff like that, but it wasn't a big deal. Didn't have anything. Well, I might have had something in the house in the freezer, but got rid of all that stuff. Stopped doing Christmas, and I was like, okay, we can't do Easter. It's not biblical. Birthdays, so we stopped doing birthdays. Um, but my eyes have been opened to the the stronghold that I had on me was the spirit of lust. And, also going back to 2020, when I repented, the Holy Spirit was with me. I started getting oppressive, demonic attacks, so much to the point where, like, I could feel the presence at night when I slept over me. I had one sleep demon paralysis, and I had learned how to bind and rebuke spirits. So I found that I was doing this quite often, binding and rebuking spirits. Um, well, even we went camping. We went camping once, and the spirit was there. It was just, and I realized, now I can look back and see they were not happy that I turned and repented. and left that lifestyle. And I was even having dreams in my dreams where I would walk into this dark house, and in the shadows, there was these demons. I could feel that they just wanted to pounce on me. And whatever I was saying, the demons would stay back. They wouldn't come. So I was like, I think God's trying to show me that, I have the power to rebuke in his name. Um, so um fast forward a little bit. So we stopped going to church. Um, we've been, I've been, we were doing Bible studies here. There's nobody else but my sister. My sister, um, she also left the church. She left the church like a couple weeks before me.
So because
Um,
this was the sister that had stumbled upon Melissa and something was resonating there for her,
something.
she clued
Mhm.
in before you did. Wow.
Yep, yep. She clued in before me, and she left. And so then I started watching Melissa, and for the first time ever, I, read through the whole Bible, from front to back and understanding everything. Like nothing was out of place. Whereas, with the other understandings, things were out of place, and you'd have to kind of toss that verse out. That doesn't mean anything anymore because it doesn't apply to us.
But it's got to be
So,
why we're told to have like these eyes of a child, right? Like because if you give the actual Bible to a child, they're not going to start inventing crazy things like, oh, the food laws are canceled and oh, they're going to take us away from here. A child like my teenagers are starting to read the Bible and they see everything so clearly because they're not muddied up from any of that man-made invented doctrine. They don't have it.
right. And I would find that two of my friends, one that I was working at the bakery with, after COVID, met her. She like could pop off verses. She was like, she had Bible knowledge, right? And I found a friend that his father was a pastor, so he was online doing um, his little speeches. I was like, oh, who's that? And Watson's like, oh, we
Can I
graduated.
pause you
I
for
was like, oh,
1 second, Audrey? I don't know what changed with your mic, but something weird happened. I don't hear you so well anymore. Oh, yeah, you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Okay.
Okay. So, I had accumulated a couple Christian friends on my walk. Also, while we were at the church too, before we left, my son and my husband got baptized. That just meant a lot to me that they were, they wanted God. They wanted God. And so we were baptized. And so my friend, I was so excited. I'm learning this new information. And I was like, one night I messaged her. I'm like, did you know that the animals that went on the ark, they actually went 7 by 7 clean, 2 by 2 unclean? I was like, I didn't know that. I was taught in Sunday school, it's just 2 by 2 they went on. And she came back at me really nasty. And she knew that I was watching Melissa. I was sharing stuff. And I started sharing with her things that I was seeing, and she got really nasty with me. And that was my first time ever being persecuted, really. Having somebody come against me and I was so excited, and she just killed it. I cried. I was so upset. And then she apologized, and then we were talking again. Um, and then I would try to share more, and it got really, really nasty. And to the point where I was like, I'm gonna have to like stop our friendship because we can't, we can't do this, you know. So we stopped talking for a little while because it was Paul, and I was new to it, so I didn't know. I wasn't indoctrinated into Paul. Um, I wasn't indoctrinated in, I thought it was weird that you just say this prayer and you were saved. I was like, this just seems too easy. Like, but what about the Ten Commandments? What about these things that are God's saying? Like, I was like, that's just too easy. Like, it doesn't seem right. And so uh, I would post things, and our friend would comment, and I try to correct. And he come at me one day, and he's just like, you just come into this Torah thing and you think you know everything, and who are you to tell me anything? Because his dad was a preacher, and he knew everything, like, and Paul this, Paul that. And now with me, you know me studying and stuff, I understand. Because at first too, when I was trying to look at it, one would tell me, well, this is what Paul's saying, and then I'd read scripture, and I'm like, it doesn't, it just, I don't, it, it doesn't go together. So after I've gotten the understanding and have read from the beginning to the end, like I said, nothing is out of place. Everything makes sense. I know who I am. I'm Israel. I, um, and I've just been, I don't know what else to. I've been the only one in the family though that has, you know, pursued. So and so we started keeping Sabbath, obviously, right? We got rid of all of the pagan stuff. We started keeping Sabbath. Um, family, husband, keeping Sabbath, some. Um, the kids still work, where I have a great job right now. I'm a baker, and I just, I don't work. I can take whatever time I want. So God placed me too, because, I ended up losing the job up at the bakery. Well, they transferred me down, and it was a blessing because now I'm like close, my schedule. But I was like, nothing is going to take me away. Like, my job can go. I don't care. Like, nothing is going to budge me. Like, I am hardcore. Is like my life has changed so much. Like I said, I used to watch movies. I don't watch movies. I don't listen to music because I can't listen to music and watch movies and not see the the wickedness in it. It's the Holy Spirit, where uh, if someone's swearing, it's I can't be around it. um so I, stopped DJing. I was like, I can't, obviously I can't keep Sabbath if I'm going to DJ on Friday and a Saturday. Um, you know, there's just so much in my life that, I have chickens, I have a garden, so I homestead. I work as a baker, a pastry chef at a restaurant right now. Um, and I'm a homebody. That's all I want to do. Like, I don't want to be doing the things that I used to do in the world. Like, I totally understand what it means for us to come out of the world and be separate, you know? So I just I just want people to know. And it's like, God, when I repented, he took that spirit of lust and destroyed it, like completely destroyed it. Like, um, yeah. And I guard my eyes, where before I wouldn't do that kind of thing. Um, the only book I read is the Bible. Like, that's the only book we need to read. Um, but there was a period of time I was like, oh, I'll watch Little House on the Prairie. That's good. No, I can't even do that. Um, the kids call me weird, you know, but that's fine. I don't know. Um,
That's amazing. And this is a very, very short period of time. I've had a similar timeline to you where my eyes were completely closed until COVID. And then I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But I mean,
2020.
when the spirit moves, it can move very, very quickly. And, you look, it's in his time, right? So there's people who have been on some sort of path for a shorter time or a longer time. Some people have been on, going to church, for example, their entire lives, and they'll never realize what they're learning is wrong.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
Jess and I are going to make a video. We have a number listed that are everything you're talking about tonight. So it will already be out by the time your testimony goes up, but we've made one about
Cool.
tribulation rapture. And then we have this idea to make a video about exactly what you're talking about with the church and the pastors of like, are they lying or are they just deceived? It's like my instinct to be like, damn these institutions and they're, but like I don't think that the majority of pastors are realize that they're wolves, for example. Like we can make the argument that they're
Right.
wolves, but I think I think I look back to my life as a yoga teacher. I was a yoga teacher for many years, and I was a children's yoga teacher, and I believed I was helping these people with my whole heart. So I have to believe the majority of pastors, even if they'll bury people like you and I, like they will just like, send us to the dogs because we're preaching the doctrines of demons.
Yeah.
Behind that
Yep.
is they're trying to protect their flock from these dangerous ideas of keeping the Torah. But they're so blinded, and I have to think that they're blinded because they choose on some level, many of them just choose not to know the truth because they'd have to give up what we gave up. You gave up the entire world, right? I'm very similar
Mhm.
to you in like my inability, like I'm so boring most of the time because I can't really exist in society with all of the like everything kind of offends me. It sounds so silly, but like I'm really like I'm so sensitive now to everything that
Yep.
enters my eyes and my ears, and I totally relate to to so much of your story, Audrey. This has been just such a pleasure, and I'm so happy that COVID too. I've often said like we know that our Father uses everything, and He used
Oh yeah.
crazy crazy thing to wake so many people up. Like if that doesn't backfire on the bad guys, I don't know what does. Here's this evil plan and he's like, "All right, I'm just going to wake all these people up."
Well, right. And 2020 vision, just think about that. That was the year of vision, 2020 vision.
Very
A
cool.
lot of people, a lot of people woke up to that. And Yah showed me this weekend too, that when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, he said that this was in Matthew. He was telling them that you don't see because my father, because they don't have the father, or they don't see, and I think a lot of the pastors don't see because they weren't taught by the father. That's what it was. We have to be taught by the father. They're taught by man, and so they get into this religion, and I think God just blinds them. So I think that they're blind. They're blinded on purpose because they've chosen this. And yeah, I don't think that they mean to. And a lot of them have changed a lot of their lives too because like they were drunk, or this pastor had given us some stories of his past life, and it sounded like most of ours. But definitely,
There's
I
like this
think that
plateau though, right? Like I just feel like there's a plateau and it happened with many of us who there was like this whole new age to Jesus movement where like many of the people that I knew who were there, they were like truth mostly, we're all spiritual seeking. So we were seeking in the new age, then we come to Jesus and like so many just stopped there. And like I was stuck there for only a couple months when I thought Jesus was the end of the rabbit hole. I'm like, "Oh, it's finally finished." And then I was like, "Oh no, this is where it all begins." So then we keep digging, right? But so many people just, "Okay, that's enough. Jesus, Jesus and that's that, Okay, well, have you discovered who your Messiah is? Have you discovered what he did in his life and how we're supposed to walk like him? You think that he has
yeah,
blue eyes and his name is actually Jesus. Let's keep going, guys.
yeah, and that's the thing too, is that they just stop right there and they don't go further. It's been amazing, and I see a lot of times comments, well, you're going back to the law, and you don't have grace, and you don't have the Messiah. Oh, if you just would understand how much we have the Messiah. Like, because the law points to him, it's all about him, it's his testimony, it's his being. Like, you can't.
It is so simple when you finally have, and there's probably more scales to fall off our eyes. You and I don't know all the
True.
things that there are to know, but from there to there, it's
Mhm.
like, thank God, literally, that he took the scales off our eyes so we can see, and all we can do is pray for these people who
Yeah.
I think of myself too. I was telling my husband today on the phone when a few months before I got it, or started to get it, I had seen a bunch of people posting on Facebook about this kind of thing, and I was so mad. And I went to the pastors at church and I was like, why do all these white people think they're Jewish? Like, why are they following Mosaic law? I knew enough about what I was supposed to believe that I could say they're following Mosaic law, and I was enraged. And I started a little chat with some of the Christians I knew to talk about how this person, that person, the other person are teaching all these bad things. And I was so mad. And then the pastors agreed with me. Obviously, no, they just don't know how to read the Bible. And then like maybe a couple weeks or months passed, and then I had let it go, and then I got back into it through a friend, and I was like, "Is this Hebrew roots?" He's like, "Nah, it's just a stupid name." And then I was like, then I started digging into the book of Hebrews, and then it was like, oh no, these people were right. They were actually right. So
Yeah.
that's my big comfort in knowing that all the people around us who are, you're running like everybody has an opportunity to eventually see what we see. They might choose not to.
Right. And you can tell when you talk to some, there is a spirit that definitely is on them. It's like a religious spirit that, like I said, my friends, they got angry at me. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? And I can see the spirit, you know. And I feel, and I've prayed on it a lot, that God says it's a heart condition. And some are going to take a little bit longer. And maybe and because our hearts are in a special place first, we were just first there, and that our eyes were opened because our hearts were there. Theirs will be at some point. Some may need more than a virus, a 2020 experience to really force them to, like, because it was the fear of God, the fear of tribulation, the fear of, am I going to make it?
So
That
that's
was
it. So
really,
when you're clouding yourself with that belief, that false belief that, oh, I don't have to worry, I basically don't have to worry about anything I do here because I'm covered by grace. Once saved, always saved. And he's taken me out of here before anything bad happens anyway. Like you live your life very different than if you fear the Lord.
yes, yes.
Completely
And
different.
that's what, yeah, that's what really opened my eyes was I feared that, oh gosh, we're in the end days and I'm doing wicked and I'm not going to make it.
My nanny, my
And
grandma, who's 102 or 104, she's had Alzheimer's for a number of years now, and I haven't spoken to her in some time. But she was Catholic her whole life, and that was the thing I remembered about religion, if I can say it like that. I She made me so
mhm,
scared of even like the year 2000 Y2K. Like she was always kind of fear mongering me about the mark of the beast and saying like one day they're going to implant something in your hand and you won't be able to buy or sell. And like, so I had that as a child as well. And I wish that she could speak. I wish I could speak to her now. And I wish she could understand where we are in time and space because she was not wrong about so much. She was so right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, oh, wow. I know
But
my
bless your
father-in-law
mom for
also.
having all of the difficulties that you guys went through with her religion and with the stuff that she was bringing. It was very hard for you, but largely because of that, you recognized the truth when you
Yes.
saw it.
And that's the seed that was planted. It was, for me, it was a tribulation seed, for others, I don't know, but yeah, that's all it took was for me to remember that and for me to turn back to God. I know he's had his hand on me all along.
Yes, of
I
course.
can look back in my life and I can see, he's had his hand on me. Like, I was always like a natural path. I wouldn't take, run to do a lot of medicine and stuff like that, and always didn't like going to the doctors. Um, I've had a couple surgeries, but now I don't go. I don't go to the doctors
And now you're
anymore.
living with your high school sweetheart husband, and
Yes.
who knows where his destiny is on this path. That's another reflection we've been having these days of how many women we're surrounded by who are on this path. Like, why are all the wives waking up? And there's all these
Yes.
husbands that are either Christian or not on the path at all, but so many women come to the truth of Torah right now. First,
Right.
before
And
their husbands. It's very rare, from what I'm watching, it's very rarely the other way around. It's the women who come first, and I'm fascinated by that. He's calling us, you know?
did you see the verse in the Bible where he was going to do a new thing where the woman would encompass a man? So maybe we have the hope that because we caused man to fall in the garden, that maybe we could bring man, back to God. I don't know.
I
He
love it.
does such beautiful things, and I would, yeah, because I feel so bad that, it was the woman that, sinned first,
I think about
So
that too, but it
hopefully,
was his job. It was his job to make sure she didn't eat the apple. You know what I mean? Like, and then
true.
he turned around, he was like, it was her fault and it was your fault. Like he just blamed everybody. So
Yes, because he was the one given the instructions, right? He was supposed to make sure, he's the head. So, yes. And I think, and it is just that stigma that the church has always put on, or, it's always been that, well, it's the woman's fault, so it's kind of made me feel,
it's a
bad
funny
about it.
time
But
though.
yes,
I'm feeling like I threw all of my feminist ways for the most part. I still like even though I recently got married, but I don't know if you know, but Jesse and I, so he lives in the States and I live in Canada. So I've been a single mom for a number of years now. So I still have like single motherhood puts you in a space of we take on this masculine, we have to do all the things anyway. So I still
oh
have
yeah,
to I'm still running my house with my kids by myself. But by and large, since coming to this path, I've been able to throw a lot of my feminist views in the toilet very, very, very happily. But I'm seeing like we're talking about the women being called, and maybe in some cases, some of the women in judges where, like Deborah had to step up. There were no righteous men. The men weren't able to do the job, so the women had to come and do it. So I think there's something like that going on, and I'm hoping that all of these women that I know can help guide gently because there's also so many women who come to this truth and then like blow their marriages up because they
yep,
become Torah terrorists and they're telling their husbands they're doing it wrong. How can women be in their feminine role and naturally like just show their husbands the truth? I think that's how it has to happen. So
yes, yes. I drop reminders, um, verses, um, you know, uh, he's a lot of men don't like to read either. So, that's one thing that my husband struggles with is, like he doesn't want to read, doesn't like reading, doesn't comprehend very well sometimes too. So I encourage, um, he needs more men. And that's another reason why, I wanted him to go to church too, was to help overcome the stronghold that still has him. And you know, and I was hoping that there would be somebody that could help him, you know. But the friend that was in the church, he would go to bars. He still drinks. So I have nobody around me that I could, what is it I'm looking for? Like that could help him. So, it would be nice to have maybe more men maybe get together that they can all group and talk about these things too. And people that have overcome
I
alcoholism.
think that our like as awful as the internet is sometimes, we're so fortunate to have it so you and I can have these discussions, but also so that people can meet each other. You know what I mean? And like it's the reason that we're called to do these testimonies right now. I don't know how many of them you've watched, but for sure you watched the one that Scott and Jesse
Yep,
did. And
yep,
just these men who overcome these
yep.
horrible things in their life and end up on this path. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I've seen a lot of people overcome that stuff. And I know he can. I know he can. I mean, with what I've overcome. Um, it's just he needs to repent, you know. And
Yeah, that's the big
but
key. We repent and then we move forward in the correct way instead of moving forward and going back like a pig to vomit, like so many people do. Because once saved, always saved, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Audrey, and we discovered that we only live about 5 hours away, so who knows? Who knows if one day
Yes.
we can find each other a little bit closer. I'm not supposed to, but I'm falling in love with the States. My country is supposed to be boycotting your country right now, but I love it. I love it. And
Nice.
Vermont is so beautiful. Everywhere that I've gone, I've been recently to Arizona, and I spent a lot of time in New York State, but everywhere I've gone in the States is just so beautiful, and the people have been really great, and
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
Good. Well, yes, 5 hours is not that far, so
No, it's
maybe
not.
someday we can make it happen. So,
It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
well,
Thank you so, so much. And we'll
thank
definitely see each
you.
other at least online until we see
Yes.
each other in real life, either, in Vermont or in New Jerusalem. I don't know. We'll see.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait for that too.
Have a wonderful night. We'll talk to you super
You
soon.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Take care.